Welcome to Lochhead on Marketing, where we're trying the world's first marketing PodStorm. 30 days of strategies and ideas to help you create the future of your choosing. Hey ho, let's go. Thanks for pressing play. I sure am glad you're here. On this episode of the PodStorm, let's talk about how to discover a category, create massive differentiation, and build a super valuable company, particularly in challenging times. We're sponsored by my friends at Oracle NetSuite. Learn how to get the visibility and control and manage your business to the penny at netsuite.com/different. That's netsuite.com/different. And my friends at Splunk want to help you turn data into doing, because in a crisis, data makes a giant difference. Check out splunk.com/D2E, as in data to everything. That's splunk.com/D2E. Now, I get a lot of questions around, how do I know if I have a category? I think I might have something. How do I discover a category? How do I know if this is a new category? How do I redesign an existing category, etc.? And the first thing you should know is I believe that categories are not discovered like, a lost island somewhere off the coast of Tahiti. They are created, they are designed, and legendary entrepreneurs, legendary marketers, legendary innovators teach the world how to see things the way they do. And so a category is not discovered like a new piece of land. It's created. You're bringing something new forward. That's why we talk about designing the future of our choosing. Legendary marketers, entrepreneurs, and innovators are visitors from the future, telling us what it's going to be like. And so I'd say that sort of to frame the context of the discussion. The next thing I'd tell you is, that old Bill Clinton quote. Say that 5 times fast. It depends on what your definition of is. And so let's get into it. The first thing I'd point you to is, what is it, the insight that you're differentiating on? What's what we call missing in the market category that you see? And sometimes that missing is giant. We discover some kind of plutonium of sorts. And sometimes it's, you know what? We think bundt cake is awesome. There's no bakery focused on bundt cake. We're going to launch the world's first bundt cake bakery called, you guessed it, Nothing Bundt Cake. And now, if I'm not mistaken, there are over 200 franchises of a bakery where most bakeries fail. This one succeeds because it niches down. The founders niche down on bundt cakes. And so it might be a small differentiator that you turn into a very meaningful thing, or it might be a giant breakthrough that's a leap forward for humankind. And so you can really turn any missing into a either new category or redesigned existing category if you do it thoughtfully. So let's talk about that. In Play Bigger, we unveil a learning we got from Anne Miraco, who is one of the co-founders of Floodgate Capital. You may have seen recently we had Mike Maples on Follow Your Different, and we just did an episode in the PodStorm of talking about Mike's concept of backcasting. So Anne and Mike started Floodgate. And here's what Anne says, essentially, that there's 2 kinds of market insight. There's 2 kinds of insight. There's a market insight, where you see a missing in a market, and there's a technical or an innovation insight. So an example of a market insight that I love that we talk about in Play Bigger is Les Paul. And if you're watching the video, you might be able to see behind me, that's a Les Paul hanging right there on the wall. And he was busking. He was playing guitar outside, trying to make some money on the street. And he noticed a missing. And that was, his guitar wasn't very loud and people couldn't hear him. And as a result, he wasn't making as much money. And he had that market insight, and he thought, if I could make my guitar louder, more people would hear me. And if more people heard me, there might be more quarters and dimes and shekels in my case. And so he got to work on that missing, on that market insight, to create an amplified guitar, an electric guitar. So first he saw the market need. Second, he went to work on the product based on the problem, based on the insight, based on the missing. Um, and then there's a technical insight, and this is typically, typically, you know, if you're going to have a podcast, Lochhead, you should learn how to talk. Typically, an engineer or a scientist or some kind of an inventor has a technical insight. That is to say, they're fooling around with their mechano sets, with their software, with whatever it is they're playing with, and there's something they're trying to do technically for one reason or another, and they feel limited. And as a result, they go to work on solving a technical problem that may or may not have a market or category applicability, but for one reason or another, the inventor, the scientist, the engineer gets really fired up about this technical thing that she wants to do, and she goes and solves the problem that way. In either case, a technical insight or a market insight, it's predicated on a missing, which translates to a problem. And so I'd ask you, what's the missing? What's the insight? And what type of insight is it? Then I'd ask you to answer 3 questions that we talk about in Play Bigger as well, which is number 1, can you explain to me like a 5-year-old what problem you're solving? Because clarity of focus, clarity of thinking, clarity of language is critical if you're going to do pretty much anything legendary. And what I've learned in over 30 years of doing this is if you can't explain to me fairly quickly what the problem is, then you probably don't understand it, and for sure don't have a solution to it. So 1, what can you explain to me like a 5-year-old what problem you're trying to solve? 2, if your company solves this problem perfectly, what category are you in? What's it called? What language would people use to describe it? What language do you, more importantly, want them to use to describe this? And the third question is, what's your category potential? How big could this thing get? And we know, based on data science research we did for Play Bigger, that at least in the tech industry, one company takes 2/3 of the economics. And so if you're that company, how much are you worth? So in closing, what's your insight? What's your missing? Is it a technical insight or a market insight? Get super clear about that. And then based on that, answer 3 questions. What's the problem? Explain it to me like a 5-year-old. 2, if you solve that problem perfectly, what's it called? Category name. And 3, if you earn 76% of the value created in that market category, how valuable is your company? All right. We would like to thank my dear friends at Atranet, building B2B websites in Silicon Valley for over 20 years. Check out atre.net. Now's the time to get focused on selling and closing sales. And my friends at Spiro, SPIRO.ai, are bringing artificial intelligence to selling on a whole new paradigm called proactive relationship management. Check them out. All right. Today's information is provided to you solely for informational purposes. And I need to remind you that this oddcast is the sole property of the Lochhead Oddcast Network. And clearly, the creators of this oddcast may have been consuming libations. We are produced and edited by living podcast legend Jason DeFilippo. Technical excellence by Jamie J. and Sarah Knox and Lochhead.com and all sorts of other great stuff. Show notes by Diane Gervasio, and Candy Dandy keeps the trains running on time. The thought I'll leave you with today comes from Marcel Proust, who said, "The real voyage of discovery consists not in seeking new landscapes, but in having new eyes." That's it. Please stay safe, stay legendary, take good care of each other, and until we're together again, follow your different.